How is it that you have managed to maintain the same flavor? People think it's just a restaurant, but it's so much more.
When I asked him, why did you start Sichuan food? He said, oh, because we didn't have any. I said, Dad, do you realize you started a food revolution? He happened to train a guy, you might have heard of him, Bappi Lahiri.
Oh, wow.
Bangla rock has had its roots in Trincas. Gautam Chattopadhyay went on to form India's first rock band, Mohiner, Ghoraguli. I believe Usha auntie said, no. We're sorry. And that became her trademark. Trincas is so much more than what you can actually call it.
If you grew up in Calcutta, chances are you don't just know Trincas, but you feel Trincas. Trincas has been a part of Calcutta since 1927. And today we're sitting with the man who has inherited that legacy and is keeping it alive with the same old charm. Please welcome Mr. Anand Puri, owner of Trincas. Let's step into the stories hidden inside these walls. Welcome to Host Diaries, Mr. Puri. Thank you so much, Mr. Puri, for being on our show, Host Diaries. It's an absolute honor to have you today.
Listen, Yashraj, please call me Anand. Mr. Puri is, I think, on the golf course today, but...
Okay, Anand it is. So if I gave you 30 seconds to describe Trincas to someone who has never been to Calcutta and never heard about Trincas, how would you tell them what Trincas is?
I tell them it's a time warp, it's a time capsule, and it has so much history that's behind it that every wall you look at definitely has a story to display. If the walls could talk, they would have entire verses to sing to you because that place is steeped in history. It pretty much tracks the history of modern urban India over the last 100 years.
And I presume your entire childhood must have been spent to a certain degree in the restaurant, or?
No, not at all, actually. Mostly it was Dad's place of work, and we'd see him sparingly because he worked all the time. Now I know what he was doing because it took up so much time to just manage such a big place with so many different things going on at the same time. It's like a three-ring circus because you've got food, service, and music. And then you have to deal with all three worlds that are sort of coming together, would make up this entity that is Trincas. And it's this nebulous entity because it's so hard to sort of pin into like a little box and say that Trincas is this. It's not that. It's so much more than what you can actually call it.
People think it's just a restaurant, but it's so much more. It's so much more than that. You're a third generation custodian of this place. When did you realize the depth of what you were inheriting?
I'm still realizing it because what's happened is when I stepped in, I knew very little about the restaurant, knew very little about history, both of Calcutta and of India, and especially of the restaurant. But what's happened with Trincas is that it sort of opened this, I won't say Pandora's box, but it's opened this box. And all these beautiful sort of paper airplanes of memories have come out. And once you start going into that box, you find so much connection to so many things that have happened. For example, just really small example over here. When I looked at the deed of possession of the property that Trincas is on, it dates back to 1858. And 1858 would put it in tandem when the British government started taking over from the East India Company, and that's probably when records were kept. So the property history goes back and ties in with Indian history, which happens to overlap with British history at that particular point in time. So it opens up one rabbit hole after the other, and you're soon walking around being able to identify all sorts of strange connections and beautiful things that have happened in the past, as well as some not so beautiful ones. But it's amazing to see how things have progressed over time.
It's truly turned into a social institution, more than just a restaurant.
Oh, it always was.
Yeah.
It always was. There was always something happening at Trincas, whether it was the tea room and bakery in its early days, whether it had, just started the jazz scene off in Calcutta, whether it was, actually it didn't start the jazz scene, it took it a couple of steps further. But there's some amazing stuff that's happened throughout. And the number of people, Yashraj, I calculated, would have been close to 10 million over 99 years of Trincas that have actually been touched by this restaurant. And Calcutta's diaspora has sort of gone outwards over the decades, and they've been spreading all over the world. So people from Calcutta, you'll find them almost everywhere. And they've taken a little memory with them, and that memory is Trincas. Whether directly or whether through a family member, you'll always find somebody who's got a Trincas connection if they're from Calcutta.
And that's so true because I had a couple of guests over, I don't know, a couple of days ago from Bombay, and I asked them, where are you grabbing dinner? They said, we're grabbing dinner at Trincas
Oh,
because,
nice.
because if you had one restaurant and one night in Calcutta, you would choose Trincas because it's the only restaurant that sort of has the ability to imbibe, and
It
give you
embodies the time.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
it embodies that feeling of nostalgia that Calcutta thrives on.
I had somebody come in day before yesterday, and he had me called over. I was walking through the restaurant. It was the evening, and the band was playing, and he tells the steward to call me over. I go over, and he says, "Hi, I'm Chaturvedi. I'm from Agra." I was like, "How are you doing, sir?" He's like, "It's my 82nd birthday, and I'm coming back after 60 years."
My goodness.
So I said, "Happy birthday, welcome back. Let me give you the tour to refresh your memory." And I showed him this menu from 1961 that had prices of 3 rupees and 50 paisa. He was like, "Yes, I remember this menu." So it's, a walk down memory lane for a lot of people. But for other people, it's just peeking into the past and seeing this amazing world that used to exist. And the stories are unbelievable.
If the founder of Trincas walked in today, what would shock him the most and what would make him feel the most proud?
I think the crowds. I think that's a double-edged answer, right?
Yeah,
Because number one, India's population has grown, and everywhere you go, there's a crowd. Back in the day, if you look at 1927, when Cinzio first started the restaurant, a busy Park Street was a couple of cars and a horse carriage, maybe a cycle, maybe a few people walking by, and that was busy. But 100 years later, you've got taxis, you've got pedestrians, you've got hawkers, you've got all this going on the street, and it's definitely crowded. But the same goes with Trincas because it's we have a lot more footfall walking in than you would have had maybe 100 years ago.
Your grandfather, Mr. O.P. Puri, what made him buy Trincas? It's a risk to buy a tea room and then convert it into a restaurant plus an entertainment space in the 1950s, 1960s. So, what made him take this leap of faith?
He has a very interesting story because his grandfather was actually really wealthy. During his father's time, the family lost all their money and they lived quite a horrible life up until the time he was 17 or 18, and he just lost his parents then. From what I understand of the history is it could not be helped that they lost all the money, but he ended up coming to Calcutta looking for opportunity, and he started working at the Oberoi Grand at the age of 18. At the Oberoi Grand, he sort of found his footing and was sent to all the different Oberoi hotels all over India to sort out any problem hotels. So he did such a good job that when he came back to Calcutta, posted at the Grand Hotel, he'd had about 4 or 5 hotels that he'd fixed up for MS Oberoi. And he was definitely keen on the hospitality space. So him and his best friend at the time, Ellis Joshua, started looking for a space that they could go into on their own. You have to remember that there was a lot of change happening in the country. The Europeans were leaving. The old ways of doing things were sort of changing over. Eating out had become a more regular pastime for Indians. Indians never ate out as part of the culture. You'd only eat out at a wedding, or you'd eat out if you were staying in someone's house. But to go out for a dinner or to go out for a lunch was catching on faster and faster in the population. So I guess he saw the gap over there and he said, look, Europeans are leaving, Indians are starting to go out, there's a future in this, let's get into it and take it from here, because the only way we'll get beyond our 350 rupees salary is to have our own space and make our own fortune, come what may. So that's how he got into it.
That's such a lovely story. Being such an old restaurant, and there are a few of them on Park Street, and it's very noticeable that there is a generational way of running that hospitality, especially when you see the staff who work over there and compare it to the kind of staff that are in a more modern age restaurant. How have you been able to preserve that old school way of hospitality?
I think it passes through from staff to staff, because there's a certain way of an institution. You have this way of doing things. Like if you finish having your starters, they'll come and clear the starter plate and put in a fresh plate for you, right? So that's something that we've been doing for decades, and that's something we continue to do. But it also takes a little bit of supervision from the top, and you have to remind people that You must greet people when they walk into the restaurant, even if they're not sitting at your table. If you are close by, smile, nod, acknowledge, good evening, anything. But make sure you acknowledge people. So it happens a lot that I do guide my team, and the team picks it up. And once they've picked it up, it becomes the norm. And that's how we go forward.
That's amazing. So, are there any like unwritten rules that they follow that can't be broken?
Don't yell. But still, in a loud restaurant, sometimes you have to tell the guy, "Chammach uthalo." So, they're shouting over the music, and that's okay. Trincas is a much more relaxed vibe than sort of a stiff collared restaurant where you have to sit down and behave yourself. You are permitted a little bit of fun. For example, I don't bother the boys too much about their haircuts, so we've got some really cool haircuts going.
Oh, that's very cool.
I had a guy who's in his late 30s who suddenly decided he wanted to buzz cut the sides uh, of his head, and his haircut has come out really cool. So I congratulated him the other day. New lease of life for keeping things young.
Yeah. Let's imagine Trincas in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
We all know who you meet today and what the vibe is today. But I want you to throw me back and tell me what, according to you or according to your family, would be Trincas in the 1960s. Give me a mental picture as to who would you meet over there, what would they eat, what were the dishes that were famous at that point of time.
So you've got in the 1960s, Calcutta itself was very different, and so was India. So Calcutta was probably the premier hub of entertainment in India. And Calcutta had enough of a history of having the best outside of London. I'm not even saying Asia or India, I'm saying the best outside of London. Because Park Street had built up that reputation, the Oberoi Grand, the Great Eastern, all these places had built up that reputation of having absolutely fantastic eating out, fabulous entertainment. So you had this pedigree of entertainment, food, and the kind of people and the kind of dressing, the kind of forward thinking that was required to have this really vibrant city in the 60s. And in the 60s, the early 60s, uh, if you had to walk into Trincas, you'd have to wear something called a DJ.
What is that?
A DJ is a dinner jacket.
Oh, wild.
The first time I heard DJ, I was a little worried. But then I said, okay, a dinner jacket, done. Trincas actually had a little rack of extra DJs. In case you forgot yours and you showed up at the restaurant in just your shirt, you had to put on a suit jacket just to be seated at a table.
And you had extras lying for people who didn't
Yes,
come? Okay.
there were extras. We did our best not to piss people off. But this was a rule. It was sort of a norm in all good restaurants. First of all, you'd have to be dressed amazingly. The ladies would probably wear either saris if you were going with an Indian look, or they would wear some sort of gown in the evening, or they'd wear pantsuits, or anything that was elegant. Jewelry, of course. So you can imagine walking into this place, let's say at 7 o'clock in the evening, and you step in and you can smell cigarettes, and you can smell cologne and perfume and coffee, and you can smell the sizzler that's just gone by. It's this whole mix of smells. And somewhere, the old restaurants have that particular smell that sort of becomes part of the ambience of the restaurant. It's not a good smell, it's not a bad smell. It's just the smell of the restaurant. It's their signature smell.
Yeah.
This is what you're greeted by, and you're greeted by this packed place with all these people beautifully dressed, with these aromas around you. You would probably have a band playing in the background, so you'd have this amazing jazz music. If you're asking about particular people, you'd get people who were called boxwalas. Now, boxwalas were people who worked in offices. They worked with holding companies, and they worked with holding companies are management agencies. So they would manage businesses for people who didn't live here. So well-traveled, well-spoken, well-educated. Some of the people turned out to be celebrities later, like Amitabh Bachchan, like Victor Banerjee. You'd have the celebrities of the day as well. So you'd have perhaps the West Indian cricket team walking in, or you'd have politicians or industrialists or the who's who. So quite a mix of people at Trincas, but that's the atmosphere of the 60s. These big cars going by outside. It's a privilege to go to a restaurant. People would save up a month's salary perhaps to go out and just have one evening out that was special. And I think Trincas had a fair few people that came in and had very special moments there.
You're really good at painting a mental picture.
I love my little worlds. You know? I love painting these pictures in writing or even in the restaurant itself. It's been so nice to be able to recreate that world and make it something that people can actually experience and enjoy.
Lovely, lovely. Trincas isn't just a restaurant, as we spoke about. It's a stage. When did music become such a cornerstone of its identity?
Up until 1960, it was just a tea room and a Swiss confectionery. When my grandfather and his business partner and my grandmother, she had a huge role to play, let's not forget. 1959, when they bought the place, they moved in and decided to do this whole refurbishment. So by the time they got everything refurbished, it was 1961. And that's when the stage came up. And one of the first people that they hired to go on stage was a Greek singer, and her name was Anita. But Anita showed up in Calcutta and she got Delhi belly.
Oh, wow.
So Anita couldn't be on stage, but here we had this fantastic orchestra set up for 1961, the winter season of 1961. And it was Chris Perry and his orchestra. Now, Chris Perry, I didn't know this until a month ago, turns out to be a Goan.
What?
Chris Perry turns out to be the Bap of Konkani music. But at that time, he was an aspiring musician and he was playing the circuit in Calcutta and in Bombay. And he could play 5 instruments. And he had this reputation of being able to switch from a saxophone to a trumpet mid-song, which is really rare.
That's very cool.
So Chris Perry and his orchestra were one of the first famous groups to perform at Trincas in 1961. And that's how the music scene started in Trincas. There was the girl called Molly Pereira who sang with him. Again, from Goa, amazing voice. And Chris Perry went on to great things. He went on to Bollywood. He did a couple of Hindi movie soundtracks. You know when you hear that trumpet sound in an old film song from the 60s?
Yeah.
That's the jazz music influence that comes through the Goan musicians into the Hindi soundtracks. So what you hear in Hindi movies from the 60s and the 70s actually came from places like Park Street.
That's crazy. So that's when Calcutta became a jazz city, because jazz is also a really central part of Calcutta's identity.
Calcutta had become a jazz city in the 40s, actually, because this was a time when that movement was starting to take off all over the world. And Calcutta was also the Allied base during World War II. So it had 500,000 soldiers that came in from all over the world. So you had Canadian, you had Australian, you had American, you had the Brits, all people from Africa. Anywhere the British Empire touched, soldiers were being flown into Calcutta because they had to fight the Eastern Front. Now, the Eastern Front was Japan, and Japan had taken over Singapore and invaded Burma. Now, Calcutta was next on the hit list. So the city was really tense. And to sort of calm things down, they brought in jazz music, which was becoming popular in the US. And a lot of jazz records got sent from America to India, to Calcutta, for the troops. And then what happened was that jazz music being available then proceeded to influence a lot of the local culture and also seep into entertainment and going out. So you had places like the Great Eastern Hotel. They had a nightclub called Maxim's. You had the Casanova bar at the Grand Hotel. There were a lot of really amazing places back then, and they all had jazz. And musicians would come from all over the world. So you would have someone like the Great Hutch, who was rumored to be dating Edwina Mountbatten.
Oh, wow.
You also had showgirls from Paris. You had Japanese dancers. There was this whole slew of things. And they ended up changing the way that India viewed entertainment and going out. So they set a standard that would not have come in otherwise. They made it this very enjoyable way of going out and having a good time.
I wanted to discuss a little bit about the food as well. There are some iconic dishes that are there in the Trincas. There's a lobster thermidor, 100%. Cocktails such as the Baganbadi cocktail.
Yeah.
The lobster thermidor has been on the menu since the 1960s. That's insane. Why does it still matter? And how is it that you have managed to maintain the same flavor over 65 years?
Well, there's a recipe. That's one.
No, but even though the chef has changed, probably the quality of the ingredients.
Yeah, it gets hard sometimes to make sure things are in control. And it's every restaurant person's goal to push forward the same consistency throughout. It's been a task, but it's happened. And it's been very gratifying to see that people have actually appreciated the food and people are actually coming for the food. Even though there's this fabulous entertainment happening, there's all this history around you, people still come for the food. The Bagan Bari cocktail that you mentioned is a new addition. I added it 3 years ago. I wanted to do something that was modern, but still Bengali and had a couple of local flavors.
It's quite popular though, the Bagan
So
Bari cocktail.
it's a bestseller. And I just imagine if you were Bengali, what would be your thought of like a relaxing day? And then I thought, oh, go to the Bagan Bari. Bagan Bari, of course, means garden house. And then you picture what you'd feel in a garden house. You'd be able to sort of smell the breeze of the grass. So it would probably be summer. There'd be lychees in the tree. There'd be the smell of flowers. And taking all that into account, I created the Bagan Bari, which is lychee, lime, and rose.
That's amazing.
People love it. Once they start drinking that drink.
On a weekend, how many orders of lobster thermidor goes out of the door?
I actually have not looked recently.
How often do you eat a lobster thermidor?
Sometimes I have to hold back, even if I want one, because we usually run out of it.
People's palate, people's taste and preferences, they change over time. How do you keep such heritage dishes relevant with modern tastes and flavors?
Do you need to keep it relevant, or is it relevant already? That's why it's a heritage dish.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a classic flavor that's easily loved, and that's what makes it a heritage dish. That's what actually allows you to transcend. You know how they say there's a difference between style and fashion?
Yeah.
So this is style. It's not fashion. It's not going to be here for a season and gone the next.
It's not a trend.
It's going to run through the generations.
Is there any pressure by anyone from, or most people from Calcutta, to never touch these dishes? Right? Because I'm sure like there must be so much emotional attachment by the people or your regulars who come to Trincas. Is it difficult to play around with the menu?
I don't want to play around with the menu too much. I think it's great as it is. We've changed some of the Chinese dishes, which I think have gotten a great response. You know, we've upgraded certain things, we've modernized certain things. For example, with the chili chicken, if you have a normal chili chicken, usually you deep fry the pieces of chicken, and then you toss it with the soy sauce and the capsicum and the onions, the chilies. But what we do is we offer also a healthier option. Now, in the healthier option, it's sliced chicken, so it's not deep fried. And we toss it directly with the ingredients, and you get a much lighter dish. And I think that's how you adapt the classic flavor to something that's modern, such as, you know, the consideration that you want to eat lighter.
What's the most misunderstood dish on the menu?
The drums of heaven.
Oh, really? Why?
I love that name.
Yeah.
So over time in Calcutta, which I think is the birthplace of Chinese food in India, if you ask me, lots of places have loved the name. And they've decided to call any random thing the drums of heaven. However, Mingroom has a history and Mingroom has a pedigree. And Mingroom was the first in the city to produce this dish called the drums of heaven. And what it looks like is it's a drumstick of chicken that's coated in a batter and deep fried. So it's crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. It doesn't have masala. It doesn't have that bang that your Indian palate is expecting. It has texture and it has subtlety to it. So a lot of people come in expecting, number one, they probably expect drumsticks or, you know, like a chicken lollipop instead of an actual drums of heaven, because they've heard lollipops being called drums of heaven. So they come in and they say, what is this? I had a complaint this morning. The guy gave us a 1 star. He said, not good. I could understand that he'd never eaten this dish before, and he'd just gone on the hype of bloggers. It's a very simple flavored dish. You go in with the sauce, and the sauce is yum, and then you put in a little bit of chili paste on top of that. It'll blow your mind. I have other people who only come to Trincas for that dish, and they can't stop waxing eloquent about it, which is why now there's a hype, and the other lot doesn't understand. But that's the dish.
You spoke about the Ming Room. Ming Room sort of introduced this Szechuan flavor of Chinese food to the city.
Yeah.
Currently, if you see, it's ultra popular. Right? Everyone is using the Szechuan word in practically every dish that they make.
Yeah.
Right? How did you realize that Szechuan flavor would be very palatable by the Indian masses and the Indian population?
It wasn't me, it was my dad. Calcutta basically had Cantonese and Hakka food. Now, Cantonese and Hakka food would be your chow mein, it would be your Hakka noodles, it would be dishes with more white sauce, not so much bang to them. And then Szechuan, on the other hand, if you go to China, Szechuan is chilies and garlic. That's bang.
Yeah, that's bang.
And if you're in India, you want bang.
Yeah.
So what a perfect match. So I think in 77 or 78, the Taj Hotel in Bombay said, let's design this Chinese menu. And they brought a guy called Frankie Lon from Hong Kong. He was a restaurant manager and he brought his brother-in-law who was the cook. And they started cooking Szechuan food in India, but using ingredients that they found in India. So what then happened was that they came up with dishes that were kind of unique, where they had the Szechuan influence, but they had the Indian ingredients. So your hot garlic sauce comes from there. Chili garlic noodles come from there. Taj then replicated this at their Delhi hotel. My dad happened to be working at both the hotels. He had rotated through the kitchen. He knew the recipes. He knew what things should taste like. He knew how to cook. When he came back to join the family business in 82, he said, okay, look, Chinese food is everywhere in Calcutta, but it's not like this. How about we cordon off a section of Trincas and call it the Ming Room, and we introduce this food and see what happens? And it was a huge success because that was something that people wanted to eat. That was really, it was spicy, it had lots of flavor, lots of garlic. Nobody else in India was doing it except these 2 5 stars that were so exclusive and so expensive that most of the population couldn't get a taste of that. So what dad did was he brought it in at a price point that was much more reasonable, and it democratized Szechuan food. And when I asked him the same question that you asked me, why did you start Szechuan food? He said, oh, because we didn't have any. I said, Dad, you started a food revolution. Do you realize you started a food revolution? He said, yeah, I guess you could call it that.
But he did.
He started it because within 2 months, somebody had come in. They liked the food so much. They stole the entire Chinese unit and they moved to Bangalore. So Szechuan food went democratically to Bangalore from Calcutta. So now you've got all these cooks from the Taj and Oberoi also branching out and opening up restaurants. And suddenly there's Szechuan food everywhere. But Dad was the first one to bring it to Calcutta, and he was the first one to democratize it. I think he's an unsung hero for starting the Szechuan trend in India.
I think that's insane because now Szechuan is like an adjective that's used for any kind of food. Like you have momos also, which are Szechuan. They've mixed it with South Indian food as well. If somebody in India is told Szechuan food, they can understand the flavor instantly even before eating it. It's that popular.
It's that popular.
Tell me a little bit about the other room. It feels like it's a secret society for old Calcutta. What is it really?
Okay, so there's 2 hidden rooms, not one, at the back of the restaurant. One is called the other room, and the other one is called the tavern behind Trincas. Since you asked about the other room is kind of like the Harry Potter room of requirement. You know, in Harry Potter, when you needed like a space that you wanted to call your own and you needed for your own purposes, you dreamt of the room of requirement.
Yeah.
And suddenly it was there. The other room is kind of like that also, because when Trincas first started off, they only had, when my granddad first took it over in 1959, they only had a partial license for a certain part of the restaurant to serve alcohol. So they cordoned off that section of the restaurant and they served alcohol only from that section. And that was initially called the other room. Now, a couple of months later, Trincas gets its regular bar license, but the other room continues to exist. I remember Usha Uthup telling me that, oh, you know what? When I came on stage, there were such long lines out the door that they had to knock down the wall and take in the other room. So the other room disappeared sometime in the early 70s, but it came back in 76 because there was enough of a line outside Trincas that the room of requirement was needed again. And you had people who sometimes also wanted to have a quiet drink. So the other room reappeared in the back space in 1976. So it's actually going to be 50 years this year for the other room.
And 100 years for Trincas.
And 100 years for Trincas.
Next
99
year.
This year, 100 next year.
100 next year.
Yeah. But Tavern's where it's at. Tavern behind Trincas is the new wild.
Oh, really? If you can give us a little bit of glimpse about the tavern also, that would be great.
Tavern behind Trincas started life in 1972. It was designed by Shyam Benegal's brother. And it was supposed to be this whimsical English medieval tavern with spears and shields and lances and very Game of Thrones. And it had these bumpy walls that made it look like a cave. And it was this really cool looking spot hidden behind the main restaurant. Now, what happened over there was that the tavern was the cheaper destination. If you wanted to go only for drinks, you were done with your work for the day at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, you'd go have a few drinks, hang out there, and then head home. So that lasted until the pandemic. But when the pandemic came, I sort of realized that a lot of people were not coming back just to drink. So I redid the tavern a little bit, where we changed the flooring, darkened it, made it plusher. So this tavern is navy blue and gold, which is beautiful, and changed the lighting so that it was a little nicer, spotlighting, and built a little stage. So now, as of the last year, 2 years actually, we've had LGBTQ karaoke nights every Thursday.
How lovely.
And it is amazing. And then a year ago, we started Bengali music on a daily basis. Live Bengali music is not played anywhere in Calcutta or the world at a restaurant.
That's true.
There is no place that I can think of, and there's no place that anybody else I know has thought of, that has live Bangla music every single day at a Western restaurant. So we've started that, and that's turned into, I mean, you walk in, and some days at about 8:30 in the evening, the whole crowd is singing to that song. Everybody knows the words of every song, and we're playing Bangla rock. We're doing very interesting things with there's film songs, there's old Rabindra Sangeet, but it's all blended together, and it's played on Western instruments. So you've got a guitar, you've got a drum kit, you've got a Casio, and the sound is fantastic.
That's an amazing experience. And again, you've painted a fantastic mental picture to such a degree that I want to go tomorrow myself.
Yesterday we had Vijay Benedict, who is a playback singer from Bollywood. And he sang the hit song, I Am a Disco Dancer, from the 1982 Mithun movie. And he was in the restaurant yesterday, and I took him across to tavern. I said, come and see what I'm doing there. And he sat down. He said, this is amazing. I said, how did you do this? Like, what made you do it? I was feeling so happy about that.
That's amazing. You cannot mention Trincas and not pay heed to Usha Uthup ji. What is Trinca's version of that story?
So in 1969, my grandfather, let's call him Omi, because Omi is much cooler than OP Puri.
Okay.
Omi goes to Chennai. He goes to this restaurant called Nine Gems. And all restaurants are called nightclubs in those days because they have live music. And he walks in and he sees this lady in a sari, this very svelte lady. And she's singing. And she has this deep, husky voice. And he's instantly surprised. He says, look, there's nobody in a gown. There's nobody in a Western outfit. I mean, she sounds fantastic. So different. So he goes back and he tells his partner, Josh, he must have gone, yeah, Josh, I saw this this amazing artist, and her name is Usha Iyer. The next thing you know, Uncle Josh has gotten in touch with Nine Gems, and through them, Usha Iyer. And she flies into Calcutta for the season. And the season, when I do that, is mid-November to mid-January. So she comes to Calcutta in 1969. Uncle Josh, Ellis Joshua, is wanting to put her in something Western, right? Because he feels like maybe this is not going to connect. People expect, Western Hollywood looks, and they expect dresses. They expect these very flamboyant costumes on stage. I believe Ushanti said, no, I'm going to wear a sari. My granddad said, yes, okay, go ahead, wear a sari. We're good with it. And he convinced Josh to let her sing in a sari. And that became her trademark. And she blew audiences away. And she's still blowing audiences away. And now she's added this full pair of sneakers to her sari, which she didn't have back then. I think that came about because of her daughter. But that's the Trincas story for Usha Uthup.
In the broader Indian context, what does Trinca represent for artists in the form of opportunity, in the form of audience, in the form of respect for the arts?
Trincas has had a massive influence over time. Really massive. I mean, there are some obvious people who you would think of when you say Trincas. One is Usha Uthup. Then there's a few more. Have you heard of a guy called Biddu?
No, I haven't.
So a guy called Biddu Appaya grew up in Bangalore, and with a westernized rock band, decided to come to Calcutta in 1964. On his first day in Calcutta, he sits down at Trincas to have a bite to eat, and he gets approached by Ellis Joshua. Now, Ellis Joshua says, I believe you're a musician. Would you like to get up and give us a number? So he does that. And that was an informal audition, to which Josh tells him, if you want, we can give you a slot so many times a week for so many weeks. And here's the contract. He signs on. Biddu Appaya plays in the early half of 1964 goes to Bombay, plays at a couple of places there, comes back to Calcutta, plays the season of 64-65. His group is called the Trojans. Now, the Trojans end up breaking up because Biddu says, I want to move to England and I want to find my fortune there. Biddu moves to England. In England, he becomes part of a movement. I'm talking 1964 is when he goes there, right? This is not when disco is there yet. It hasn't been born yet. And in England, while he's there, disco is born. And he becomes part of the disco movement and he produces a song called Kung Fu Fighting. Have you heard it?
Everyone goes kung fu fighting. Oh, wild.
Right. So Biddu has performed at Trincas. He now has Kung Fu Fighting and he starts working with these fantastic artists. So he's got around him, his contemporaries are the Bee Gees. There are other big names. He brings up this artist called Tina Charles and turns her into a mega star. And then he comes back in the late 70s, early 80s and decides to produce indie pop, which India has not had yet. So he takes Naja Hassan and a guy called Shoaib and subsequently Alisha Chennai, and he makes all these hits. So Boom Boom is Biddu, Made in India is Biddu, and he goes on producing these amazing indie pop artists and ends up with this huge repertoire and this huge impact on India. So this is a guy that played in Trincas in 1964, who's not only had a worldwide presence and worldwide hits, including in Japan, but also changed the flow of Indian pop music. That's the second name. Now there's one more. There's Chris Perry.
That's insane.
I mentioned Chris Perry earlier. So he played in 61 at Trincas.
Yeah.
And this guy goes on to play at various nightclubs in Bombay and in Calcutta. But he's Goan, and he was born at a time when Goa belonged to the Portuguese. So he had a special visa to work in India. So he does the Bombay club circuit as well. He also starts picking up Bollywood projects. At that time, it wasn't called Bollywood. And he ends up doing the music for Kabhi Kabhi and Trishul, which are two big Hindi movies that you would know. He also goes back to Goa, finds new talent there, and becomes the Bap of Konkani music by bringing jazz and fusing it with Konkani folk songs. So east to west India, big effect, Trincas was there. Then you've got Benny Rosario. Benny Rosario was the house band leader during the 60s, and he happened to train a guy, you might have heard of him, Bappi Lahiri.
Oh, wild.
So Bappi Lahiri's teacher basically was playing at Trincas. The kind of impact that Trincas has had on pop culture and the world of music and artists has been immense.
It's a launch
In fact, even now, if you look at just the recent past, as the pandemic was opening and closing, I decided to start the jazz movement in Calcutta once again. So I was hard-pressed to find a band that actually played jazz in Calcutta on a regular basis. The only jazz you would find would be pop-ups every now and then, special performances, or you would find them tucked behind the door of a 5-star hotel in a corner somewhere, playing background music while people had their dinner. I said I wanted to do something interesting. I approached somebody who was playing with my evening band, and I told him, his name was Willie Walters. And I said, Willie, I want to do something with jazz. He said, yeah, get it done. And I said, where will you find the musicians? Leave it to me. So he comes back with 3 musicians who are all very proficient, but have never played as a band. And he molds a new jazz band. And this suddenly becomes popular. And the idea of jazz is so cool that all of a sudden there are many more places starting to do jazz. And we're creating an ecosystem of jazz music where there are now people coming up in trios, in quartets, and everybody has their own little set and they're all playing jazz again. And we've suddenly spawned another jazz movement. That's one more. And before you go on, I'll say the Bengali music angle, where Bangla rock has had its roots in Trincas. There was a very famous Bengali musician called Gautam Chattopadhyay who performed with 2 bands in the 70s. One was called Black Cactus and the other one was called The Urge. And these were the rock bands that were playing English rock music. Gautam Chattopadhyay went on to form India's first rock band, and it was called Mohiner Ghoraguli, and it was also the first band to play Bangla rock. So not just rock music in India, but also Bangla rock. His son, Gaurav Chatterjee, then started a band called Lokhi Chara, which is one of the founding sort of big 5 of the Bangla band scene, and they performed in Trincas in 2003. You jump from the early 70s to 2003, and 2003 my mother's in charge, and she has invited these 5 Bangla bands to perform over a week. And then Bangla band music is sort of established from before, and it continues to grow. And then you come now to 2024, and I've gone and I've told my Hindi band guys, listen, I want to do Bangla music, but I want to do it at Tavern Behind Trincas. And now we've started a new movement where we've introduced live daily Bengali rock, film, and folk songs to a city that should have had, by all accounts, a Bangla band already that performs every day, but doesn't. So, we've done something that's, again, path-breaking and something that's exciting.
I think Trincas is a launchpad for so many artists in so many genres, and it's ever evolving based on what you have said, because it's two ends of the spectrum, right? Like Bengali rock, and then jazz, and then Bappi Lahiri, and then Kabhi Kabhi.
It is the spectrum. It's the spectrum. It's not even the ends of it. It's just the whole spectrum.
It's the whole spectrum. And it just shows you how versatile a restaurant can even be.
Yeah.
And the Lobster Thermidor has lived through all of it.
Lobster Thermidor has been living. It's really done well.
That's insane. That's amazing. What a journey. You came back in 2019 and launched the Trincas Timeline project. What triggered this obsession with history, and what was your passion behind it?
Lack of information.
Okay.
So when I came back to Calcutta, I started discovering certain things. One, that we didn't know what Mr. Trinca's first name was, and that really bothered me. The story is that the previous generations were all dying out. They were all going away. Nobody had the collective memory to sort of tell the younger generations what the past was. My initial thing was, I need to make an archive, and I need to save this history. I didn't even know, I had forgotten that Trincas and Fleury started as one unit, and then they split. I didn't know the date for that, but I pegged it now at 1939 or 1940, where the two split and they had their own individual places. I found heaps of information and amazing stuff, and it's all coming together in a book. But the Trincas Timeline project was basically a community-based memory project that spread across the internet and tapped into people's memories.
So how beautiful.
I would post a photo and people would see it and they would start talking. It would start a conversation. One photo, the guy recognized himself in the photo. He was sitting in Australia and he sent me another photo which showed me Biddu Apaya, which is how I knew Biddu performed at Trincas. Then I managed to get in touch with Biddu and have a conversation with him. So I've had some pretty spectacular moments with the Timeline project, and it's turned up some real gems. All the information I've given you has come through this project.
That's insane. That's amazing. So tell me the most surprising anecdote that came out of this project.
When I thought of doing this project, the first thing that happened, and you will not believe how this happened.
Okay, tell me.
I got an email, and I had just thought of doing this project. I thought of doing something around preserving memory. And I get an email where the person who's written the email says, I'm sorry for the bad English. I'm a German speaker. I'm writing to find out if Trinca's tea room still exists. To which I replied, it's called Trinca's restaurant now, but it used to be a tea room. To which she replied, I'm coming with my husband, who can speak some English, and we are bringing you some presents in December. And she shows up in December of 2019 with her husband, and they bring me photographs of the original Mr. Trinca, of the Trinca Fleury storefront together, and they tell me the whole story of how Cinzio Trinca and his wife Lily ended up going back to Switzerland and staying with Lily's family. And this lady was the nurse of Lily's niece. So,
my God,
you can just imagine the connection.
Yeah.
And she brought me information to kickstart that Timeline project. So that's the most incredible story.
Incredible. And the fact that you didn't even know Mr. Trinca's first name.
Yeah.
And now the amount of information you've been able to collect over the last few years is absolutely astounding.
Now I can tell you his grandfather's name.
To what degree do you feel that Trincas is not owned by you, but by Kolkata emotionally?
95%. 95%. Trincas is an emotion. And you can't call an emotion just yours. So there's so many people who've had special moments, and it's all because they've celebrated a birthday, met a future partner, had a wedding, a marriage proposal, had some sort of connection to the past with it. I mean, you can't take people's special moments away, right? So it is part of the collective consciousness of Calcutta, and it has created some spectacular memories. It's the first place I actually saw live music being performed. That's a memory for me, right? And there's a lot of firsts for a lot of people, and I think people take it as a little piece of their heart wherever they go in the world, and it's always with them. So I think it's definitely an emotion.
Hospitality is hard. Most restaurants die within 3 years. I would say the number would be over 99% of restaurants die within the 3 years. Trincas has survived decades. What is the secret sauce in your mind that makes Trincas different from most restaurants?
Well, it's 99 not out at the moment. I think it's been just the dedication of the people who've been in charge of it. I see it with Cinzio Trinca. I see it with my granddad. I see it with my dad. They've put up with hell and high water to ensure it survives. I'm doing the same. It's a battle. It's not easy because there are so many things other than the hospitality angle that you have to look out for and be able to navigate and survive, whether it's a changing city, whether it's a changing world, whether it's people who are coming after your business, whether it's people who are, competition that's trying to run you into the ground. There's a lot of other external factors that sort of push you around and try and say, tu janta hai, main kaun hu? And then you have to stand up and say, well, you know who we are. So
As Trinca approaches its 100th anniversary, I think that's going to be in 2027.
yes.
What's your vision for the next chapter or the next century of Trincas?
Well, there's the book coming. So the book is going to be awesome. And that ties in the history of the restaurant with the history of Calcutta. And it is a brilliant, brilliant story. There are so many tales in that. And it's not going to be one of those boring reads. It's going to really cement the fact that Trincas has been there for so many milestone moments in this country and lived through all of it and had its own tale to tell. And then after that, we'll see. You take every day one by one and you see where it goes.
Is there anything that will never change at Trincas, as many years that'll go?
Hopefully the atmosphere. Hopefully.
One sentence to describe Trincas in 2026.
Vibrant.
Most overrated myth about Trincas.
Somebody ran away with someone's wife.
Best time to visit Trincas, afternoon, evening, or midnight?
I love lunch. The jazz vibe on Saturday and Sundays is mind-blowing.
If you could invite any historical figure from Calcutta's past to dine at Trincas today, who would it be and why?
Amitabh Bachchan. Despite the fact that I've written him letters, he's not replied yet. And I would love to know what he felt like to be in the audience with Usha Uthup singing there.
What do you think Kolkata would lose if Trincas never existed?
It would lose a lot of emotion.
Why do people come back even when new restaurants open every single day?
Because we make it memorable every single time.
Thank you so much, Anand, for being on my show. This has probably been one of the most interesting conversations I've had on my podcast, an absolute eye-opener for me myself, at least, when it comes to the history of Calcutta. Cheers.